Has anyone ever looked at you in disbelief after finding out your real age? Maybe they thought you were 5 years younger, 10 years younger, or maybe they simply said, "There's no way you're that old." Most people take it as a compliment. Maybe you assume it's genetics, good skin, or maybe you've just been lucky. But what if looking younger than your actual age could reveal something deeper about you? Something connected to the way you think, the way you handle stress, the way you respond to change, and even the way you've chosen to live your life. Because people who consistently look younger than their age often seem to share certain psychological patterns. And some of them have very little to do with skincare. So if people constantly tell you that you don't look your age, pay close attention. Because these 7 hidden reasons may explain why. And you may recognize yourself in more of them than you expect. The first reason may be the one people can sense before they can even explain it. You have a spirit that is harder to break than most people realize. Think about this. Have you ever met someone who looked exhausted by life? Even before you knew their story? They weren't necessarily old, but something about them felt tired. The way they spoke, the way they reacted, the way every small problem seemed to become another piece of evidence that life was against them. Now think of someone completely different. Someone who has been through heartbreak, loss, disappointment, maybe betrayal, maybe years when nothing seemed to go according to plan. And yet, when you discover their real age, you're surprised. Not because they have no wrinkles, not because time somehow forgot them, but because there is still something alive about them. They laugh easily. Their eyes still have energy. They haven't become permanently angry at the world. And that difference matters. Because looking youthful isn't only about having a perfectly smooth face. People also read youth through expression, energy, posture, the way you respond, and the way you carry yourself. And prolonged stress can affect both physical and psychological well-being. But here's the important part. Stress is not simply about what happens to you. It's also about what continues happening inside you, long after the event is over. 2 people can experience the same disappointment. One carries it for years, replays it, feeds it, lets it become part of every new relationship and every new decision. The other feels the pain too. They don't pretend it didn't hurt. They don't force themselves to smile. But eventually, they process it, learn from it, and continue moving. That's resilience. Not being impossible to hurt. Being able to return to yourself after you've been hurt. And this is where Stoic philosophy becomes surprisingly relevant. The Stoics never promised that a strong person would avoid suffering. Marcus Aurelius himself lived through illness, political conflict, war, loss, and enormous responsibility. The question was never, how do I make sure nothing painful happens to me? The better question was, what will I allow this experience to turn me into? That distinction changes everything. Because some people survive a difficult chapter, but continue living inside it for the next 20 years. The event ended. The relationship ended. The betrayal happened years ago. But emotionally, they never left. And slowly, the past begins showing up in the present. In their suspicion, their anger, their tension, their inability to relax, their expectation that something will always go wrong. But resilient people do something different. They don't deny the past. They refuse to let the past become their personality. Maybe that's you. Maybe people look at you and wonder, how can you possibly be that age? And perhaps they don't know the full story. They don't know what you've survived. They don't know the nights you couldn't sleep, the people you've lost, the times you had to rebuild yourself when nobody was coming to rescue you. They only see the person standing in front of them now, still laughing, still moving, still interested in life. And maybe that's part of what they're actually noticing. Not that time never touched you, but that hardship never completely took the life out of you. So ask yourself, when life knocks you down, do you stay there mentally long after the moment has passed? Or have you developed the ability to feel what happened, accept what cannot be changed, and eventually stand back up? If the second one sounds like you, then your youthful appearance may be accompanied by something far more valuable than good genetics. Resilience, the ability to go through difficult seasons without allowing every season to become winter. But resilience is only the first reason. Because some people recover from the past and still begin to look older the moment life stops going according to plan. Because the second trait isn't about how you handle what already happened. It's about what happens inside you when everything suddenly changes. And that brings us to number 2. Change. For some people, that word alone creates tension. Because change means uncertainty. And uncertainty means losing the comfort of knowing what comes next. A job you've had for 15 years suddenly disappears. Your children grow up and no longer need you in the same way. A relationship ends. You move to a new city. Technology changes. Your body changes. The people around you change. And one day, you look at the life you knew so well and realize it doesn't exist anymore. Some people spend years fighting that realization. They keep looking backward. They say, things were better before. People aren't the same anymore. I'm too old to start over. That's just not for people my age. And slowly, without realizing it, their world becomes smaller. They stop trying new things. Stop meeting new people. Stop learning. Stop taking risks. Not because life has nothing left to offer them, but because they've decided that unfamiliar means dangerous. And this is where something interesting happens. The calendar keeps moving forward, but mentally they stay in the same place. Now think about someone else. Maybe they're 50, maybe 70, but when something changes, their first response isn't always, I hate this. Sometimes it's, interesting. Or, I've never done that before. Or even, why not? That's a completely different relationship with life. They might learn to use technology they once found confusing, travel somewhere they've never been, take up a hobby at 55, change careers at 48, start exercising at 62, make a new friend at an age when other people insist it's too late to make new friends. They don't pretend change is always comfortable. It isn't. Some changes hurt. Some changes take things from you that you desperately wanted to keep. But adaptable people understand something powerful. You can miss what was without refusing what is. And that distinction may be one of the reasons some people continue to carry such youthful energy. Not because change somehow stops aging, but because openness keeps them engaged with life. Their world continues expanding. Their mind continues encountering something new. They still have reasons to ask questions, reasons to make mistakes, reasons to laugh at themselves, reasons to say, I've never tried this before. And there's something unmistakably youthful about that sentence. Children say it with excitement. Adults often say it with fear. Eventually, some people stop saying it altogether. The Stoics understood that change isn't an interruption to life. Change is life. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reflected on how everything around us is constantly transforming. People, bodies, circumstances, reputation, possessions, even the things we desperately try to preserve. Nothing stays exactly where we left it. So fighting every change is like standing in a river and demanding that the water stop moving. You can exhaust yourself resisting it. You can become angry that the river isn't what it was yesterday. You can learn how to move with what is actually here. That doesn't mean becoming passive. And it doesn't mean accepting everything people do to you. It means understanding the difference between changing what you can and destroying your peace over what has already changed. Think about your own life. How many versions of you have already disappeared? The child you were, the teenager, the person you were in your 20s, maybe the person you were before marriage, before children, before the loss, before the mistake, before the success, before the moment that changed everything. They're all you, but none of them are exactly the person listening to this right now. And that's not necessarily something to mourn. It means you're still becoming. Maybe that's another reason people underestimate your age. Because when they speak to you, they don't meet someone permanently trapped in who they used to be. They meet someone who is still participating, still adapting, still willing to discover what comes next. You don't constantly say, I'm too old to, can I learn? You don't need everything to stay familiar before you can enjoy it. And when life closes one chapter, you may grieve it, but eventually, you turn the page. That ability matters. Because there's a difference between growing older and becoming rigid. Age is unavoidable. Rigidity isn't. So ask yourself, when life changes unexpectedly, do you spend all your energy wishing things would go back to exactly how they were? Or, after the initial discomfort, can you become curious about what comes next? If you can, then perhaps what people are noticing isn't simply a younger-looking face. Maybe they're noticing someone who still moves with life, instead of standing still while life moves past them. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because being open to change requires something else. Something children possess almost naturally, but many adults slowly lose. It changes the way you speak, the way your eyes respond when you encounter something unfamiliar, even the way other people experience your presence. And if you've kept this third trait alive, it may be one of the strongest reasons people sense youth in you before they ever know your age. Number 3, you never stop being curious. Curiosity. It sounds like such a small thing. But think about the last time you watched a child discover something for the first time. A strange insect crawling across the ground. The moon appearing in the afternoon sky. A machine they don't understand. A word they've never heard before. They don't simply look at it. They investigate it. They ask, what is that? Why does it work that way? What happens if I do this? And then somewhere along the road to adulthood, many people stop asking. Not because they've discovered all the answers, but because they slowly become convinced that there is nothing left worth discovering. Their days become predictable. Same conversations, same opinions, same routines, same places, same people. They stop reading about things they don't already understand. They stop asking questions because they don't want to look uninformed. They stop trying unfamiliar things because being a beginner feels uncomfortable. And eventually, they don't just stop discovering the world. They stop being surprised by it. That's when something begins to disappear. Not necessarily from the face, but from the eyes. That spark, that sense that life might still contain something you haven't seen yet. Now think about the people who constantly surprise you with their age. Maybe you've met someone in their 60s who wants to know how artificial intelligence works. Someone in their 70s learning another language. Someone at 50 picking up a guitar for the first time. Or someone who simply sits across from you at dinner, and instead of spending the entire conversation talking about themselves, they ask, what do you think? Why do you believe that? Tell me more. There's an energy around people like that. They aren't desperately trying to act young. In fact, they may be completely comfortable with their age, but their mind hasn't closed. They're still interested, still exploring, still capable of being surprised. And perhaps most importantly, they're still willing to be wrong. That's a much bigger sign of youthfulness than most people realize. Because one of the easiest ways to become mentally old is to decide that you already know everything worth knowing. You've met that person. Every new idea is stupid. Every younger generation is worse. Every new technology is unnecessary. Every unfamiliar perspective is immediately rejected. They don't examine. They dismiss. And slowly, their world gets smaller and smaller, while they become more and more certain that the problem is everyone else. But curiosity does the opposite. Curiosity opens doors. Says, maybe there's something here I haven't understood yet. And that single thought keeps the mind moving. The Stoics themselves were students for life. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful men in the Roman world. Yet his private writings weren't the words of a man announcing that he had figured everything out. Again and again, you find a man examining himself, correcting himself, questioning his reactions, reminding himself of things he had already forgotten. That's important, because wisdom isn't reaching an age where you no longer need to learn. Wisdom is realizing how much there will always be left to learn. And people who preserve that attitude often preserve something else with it. Aliveness. You can hear it in their voice, see it in their expressions, feel it when they talk about something they've just discovered. Their age may say 63, but then they start telling you about the book they just found, the place they want to visit, the skill they're trying to learn. And suddenly, 63 doesn't feel old at all. Because you're not experiencing a number. You're experiencing a person who is still expanding. Maybe this is you. Maybe you've never been able to stop asking questions. You watch documentaries about things that have nothing to do with your work. You fall down strange rabbit holes because one question leads to another. You speak to someone from a completely different background and genuinely want to understand how they see the world. Maybe you're the oldest person in the room and still the first one willing to say, "I don't know. Show me." Don't underestimate that sentence. "I don't know. Show me." There is humility in it, but there's also life in it. Because the moment you believe there is nothing left for the world to teach you, you stop meeting the world as it is. You only meet what you already believe about it. And perhaps that's why curiosity can make someone feel so much younger than their years. Not because asking questions erases wrinkles. Not because learning a language reverses time. But because curiosity changes the way you participate in life. Instead of asking, "How much time has passed?" you're still asking, "What haven't I discovered yet?" Those are two completely different ways to grow older. So ask yourself something. When was the last time you did something? For the simple reason that you wanted to know? Not because it would make you money. Not because it was productive. Not because somebody told you to. Just because you were curious. When was the last time you became a beginner again? When was the last time you changed your mind? Because somebody showed you something you hadn't considered? When was the last time something ordinary made you stop and look twice? If those moments still happen to you, then perhaps people aren't only seeing youthful features when they underestimate your age. Maybe they're seeing a mind that never completely stopped looking at life with open eyes. And that's something no skincare routine can manufacture. Before we move to number 4, I want to ask you something I'm genuinely curious about. How old are you? And how old do people usually think you are? Put both numbers in the comments. For example, I'm 58. People usually guess 45. I want to see just how common this really is among the people watching. And if you've recognized yourself in any of these first 3 signs, give this video a like. Share it with that one person whose real age nobody ever believes. And subscribe if you want more Stoic psychology and practical wisdom like this. But don't leave yet, because the first 3 signs were about how you survive, how you adapt, and how you keep your mind alive. Number 4 goes somewhere more personal, because some people carry emotions for years, without ever realizing that the weight is showing. They swallow anger, hide sadness, pretend they're fine, until eventually, the body begins carrying what the mouth refuses to say. And that brings us to the 4th reason. You don't keep everything trapped inside. Some people become very good at saying 2 words. I'm fine. They say it when they're exhausted. They say it when they're angry. They say it when someone has hurt them. They say it when they're holding back tears. And after enough years, they become so good at pretending they're fine that even they stop asking whether it's true. Maybe you know someone like this. They rarely complain. They never cry in front of anyone. They don't talk about what hurts. They don't want to appear weak. So everything stays inside. The disappointment, the resentment, the grief, the conversation they wish they'd had, the apology they never received, the words they wanted to say, but swallowed instead. From the outside, they look controlled. But control and suppression are not always the same thing. Because you can remain calm without pretending you feel nothing. And you can be strong without turning your heart into a locked room. Think about what happens when you're angry, but force yourself to act as though you're not. Your jaw tightens. Your shoulders rise. Your breathing changes. Your face changes. Now imagine carrying that tension, not for 10 minutes, but repeatedly for years. Emotional strain can affect the way we sleep, behave, interact with people, and carry ourselves. And sometimes, you can sense that weight in someone before they tell you anything. Their body is in the room, but part of them is still fighting a conversation that happened 5 years ago. That's exhausting. Now compare that with someone who has learned how to feel, without becoming controlled by every feeling. When they're happy, they laugh. Really laugh. Not the polite little smile people give when they're trying to look composed. When something hurts, they acknowledge it. When they need to speak, they speak. When they need time, they take it. And yes, sometimes they cry. Then something remarkable happens. The emotion moves through them, instead of becoming the room they live in. This is where people often misunderstand Stoicism. They hear the word Stoic and imagine someone with a stone face. No sadness, no fear, no tears. Nothing gets through. But that's not emotional mastery. That's numbness. The Stoic goal isn't, I must never feel. It's closer to, I must not become a slave to what I feel. Those are very different things. You can feel anger without allowing anger to choose your next 10 actions. You can experience grief without deciding that your life is over. You can be disappointed without turning disappointment into bitterness. You can even cry and still be strong. In fact, sometimes the stronger act is admitting, that hurt me, because now you're dealing with something real, not hiding from it, not decorating it, not pretending it doesn't exist, just facing it. Imagine two people after the end of a relationship. The first says, I don't care. But every night, they check the other person's profile. Every new relationship becomes a comparison. Every conversation about love makes them defensive. 3 years later, they're still proving how little they care. The second person admits, this destroyed me for a while. They grieve. Maybe they talk to someone they trust. Maybe they write. Maybe they sit alone and finally allow themselves to feel everything they were avoiding. They don't enjoy it. But slowly, something begins to loosen. Months later, they can remember the relationship without having to relive it. Which one is stronger? The one who never admitted pain? Or the one who felt it, processed it, and eventually stopped carrying it everywhere? Sometimes strength doesn't look like holding on. Sometimes strength looks like finally putting something down. And perhaps this is another reason certain people seem unusually youthful. They still have access to their emotions. Their face moves when they speak. Their eyes light up. They laugh without constantly checking whether they look foolish. They're capable of enthusiasm, affection, sadness, wonder. They haven't spent decades trying to become emotionally untouchable. There's still softness in them. And softness is not weakness. A person can have boundaries without becoming hard. A person can survive betrayal without becoming incapable of love. A person can understand human cruelty and still laugh loudly at dinner. That's a different kind of strength. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've been through enough to have every excuse to close yourself off. But somehow, you didn't. You still tell people you love them. You still laugh until your face hurts. You still allow yourself to care, even though caring means something can hurt you. And when sadness comes, you don't necessarily pretend it isn't there. You let yourself be human. Perhaps that's part of what people are responding to when they say, you don't look your age. They may be seeing more than skin. Maybe they're seeing expression, warmth, movement. A person who hasn't turned every difficult emotion into another wall. But there's another side to emotional health that most people overlook. Because sometimes, the heaviness you're carrying didn't begin inside you. You absorbed it from the people around you. Think about it. Have you ever spent 20 minutes with someone and walked away feeling strangely exhausted? Nothing dramatic happened. They didn't insult you. They didn't attack you. But every sentence was a complaint. Every person was an enemy. Every situation was hopeless. And somehow, their mood followed you home. Now imagine living around that energy every single day. That's where the fifth sign begins. Because people who remain vibrant over the years often learn something many people learn far too late. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your mind. And sometimes, protecting your youthfulness begins with protecting the environment your mind has to live in. Number 5. You are careful about who you allow close to you. There comes a point in life when you begin to understand something uncomfortable. Not everyone who has access to you is good for you. Some people walk into a room and somehow make everything feel lighter. You laugh more. You speak more freely. You leave the conversation feeling energized. But other people have the opposite effect. You can spend 20 minutes with them and feel as if you've been carrying something heavy for hours. Every conversation becomes a complaint. Every piece of good news has a problem hidden inside it. Every dream is unrealistic. Every person is suspicious. Every mistake is remembered. Every possibility comes with a reason it won't work. And if you spend enough time around that kind of thinking, something subtle begins to happen. You start carrying it too. Not because you're weak, but because human beings influence one another more than we like to admit. The conversations you hear every day matter. The attitudes you're surrounded by matter. The people whose opinions you repeatedly allow into your mind matter. Because eventually, what surrounds you begins to shape what lives inside you. Think about two people of the same age. One spends most of their time around people who complain about getting older. They talk constantly about what they can no longer do. How terrible everything has become. How the younger generation has ruined everything. How their best years are gone. How there's nothing exciting left. Eventually, that person begins speaking the same language. They stop making plans. Stop trying things. Stop believing that anything interesting could still happen. Not because their age suddenly changed, but because their environment taught them what someone their age was supposed to become. Now imagine the other person. Same age, same number of years behind them, but their circle is different. They have people around them who still laugh, still make plans, still challenge them, still send them a message saying, "Come on, let's go. Let's try it." Maybe they have younger friends, older friends, people from completely different backgrounds, people who don't constantly remind them how old they're supposed to feel. And when they're together, age almost disappears from the conversation. They're simply living. That difference is powerful, because sometimes the people around you don't just influence your mood. They influence your idea of what is still possible. And once possibility disappears, something inside a person can begin aging much faster than the calendar. Not the skin, the spirit. This doesn't mean you should abandon everyone who has a difficult day. Everyone struggles. Everyone complains sometimes. Everyone needs someone who will listen when life becomes heavy. That's human. The danger is something different. It's when negativity becomes someone's permanent way of relating to the world. When every conversation leaves you smaller. When every ambition you mention is mocked. When every good thing in your life becomes something they need to diminish. When you constantly have to defend your peace against someone you voluntarily keep inviting back into it. At some point, you have to ask yourself a difficult question. Why am I giving this person so much access to my mind? Stoicism has a lot to say about protecting the quality of your character. You cannot completely control who appears in your life. You cannot control what people say. You cannot control their attitude. But you do have some influence over whose opinions you repeatedly feed your attention. And attention is expensive. Every hour you spend absorbing resentment is an hour you're not feeding curiosity. Every hour spent in pointless drama is an hour you're not building something meaningful. Every conversation that pulls you back into bitterness makes it harder to remain open to life. Sometimes protecting your peace doesn't require an argument. It doesn't require revenge. It doesn't require announcing to everyone that you're cutting people off. Sometimes, you simply stop giving certain things so much access. Less time, less attention, less explanation, less emotional investment. Not because you hate them, because you finally understand the cost. And maybe you've already learned this. Maybe when you were younger, you thought having more people around you meant having a better life. So you tolerated relationships that exhausted you. You stayed in conversations you hated. You tried to impress people you didn't even respect. You kept explaining yourself, hoping everyone would eventually understand you. But somewhere along the way, something changed. You stopped asking how many people were around you, and started asking, how do I feel after being around them? That's maturity. And strangely, that maturity can preserve something youthful, because the right people bring parts of you back to life. You've probably experienced this. You meet an old friend, and suddenly you're laughing in a way you haven't laughed for months. You spend an afternoon with someone who genuinely understands you, and for a few hours, you forget everything you've been worrying about. You sit at a table with people who make you feel safe enough to be ridiculous, And suddenly nobody cares how old anyone is. Those moments matter. Not because friendship magically stops time, but because connection reminds you that you're still participating in life. Still belonging. Still sharing. Still laughing. Still creating memories that didn't exist yesterday. And there is something deeply youthful about continuing to create new memories, instead of spending every conversation reliving old ones. Think about the people closest to you right now. When you tell them you're excited about something, what happens? Do they become curious? Do they encourage you? Do they challenge you honestly when you need it? Can they celebrate your success without turning it into a competition? Can you laugh together? Can you disagree without becoming enemies? Can you be quiet around them without feeling uncomfortable? Or do you constantly leave their presence feeling tense, guilty, angry, or exhausted? You don't need perfect people. Perfect people don't exist. You need relationships where you can still breathe. Relationships where growth isn't treated as betrayal. Relationships where becoming a different version of yourself doesn't threaten everyone around you. And if you've learned to choose those relationships carefully, that may explain something about the energy people notice in you. Maybe they don't simply see someone who looks younger. Maybe they see someone who hasn't allowed years of unnecessary drama to consume every part of them. Someone who still has enough emotional space to laugh, to explore, to connect, to enjoy being alive. But there's something even more important than the people around you. Because eventually, everyone goes home. The room becomes quiet. The phone stops ringing. And you're left alone with yourself. That's when another question appears. What are you actually waking up for? Because you can have supportive people. You can protect your peace. You can remain curious. But if nothing in your life still excites you, something begins to fade. And this next trait may be one of the clearest differences between someone who is simply getting older and someone who still feels intensely alive. Number 6. You still have something that makes you want to get out of bed. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep cannot fix. You've probably seen it before. Someone wakes up in the morning, but there is nothing they are really waking up for. They go to work, come home, watch something, scroll for a while, go to sleep, then repeat it. Monday becomes Friday. Friday becomes Monday. Weeks disappear. The months, then years. Nothing is necessarily wrong, but nothing feels particularly alive either. And slowly, life becomes something they maintain, instead of something they participate in. That's a dangerous place to stay for too long, because human beings need more than comfort. We need something that pulls us forward, something that makes tomorrow feel different from yesterday, something that gives us a reason to say, I want to see what happens next. Think about the people you've met who seem almost strangely young for their age. Very often, there is something they're excited about. Maybe they're building something, learning something, planning a trip, writing a book nobody may ever publish, growing tomatoes in their backyard, training for a race, learning to dance, running a small business, helping their grandchildren, restoring an old car, volunteering somewhere every Thursday. It doesn't have to be impressive. It doesn't have to make money. Nobody needs to applaud it. It simply needs to matter to them. That's the part people often misunderstand about purpose. They hear that word and immediately imagine some enormous mission. Change the world, build an empire, become famous, leave a legacy everyone remembers. But purpose doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes purpose is much quieter. Maybe your purpose right now is raising one child well, taking care of someone you love, recovering your health, finishing something you started years ago, being the person your family can depend on, teaching what you've learned, making something beautiful, or simply becoming a better human being than the person you were yesterday. The size of the purpose isn't what gives it power. Meaning does. Imagine two men. Both are 65. Both recently retired. For 40 years. Work told them when to wake up, where to go, what needed to be done. Then suddenly, the alarm clock is no longer necessary. The first man enjoys it for a while. He sleeps late, watches television, sits around the house, tells himself he deserves to do nothing, And maybe he does. For a while. But months pass. Then one morning, he realizes he doesn't know what Tuesday is for anymore. There's nowhere he needs to be. Nothing he's building. Nothing he's learning. Nothing he is particularly looking forward to. So the days begin blending together. The second man retires too. He rests. He enjoys the freedom. But then, he starts asking a different question. Well now, not, what am I supposed to do at my age? But, what would make me interested in tomorrow? Maybe he begins teaching his grandson how to repair things. Maybe he finally takes the photography class he talked about for 20 years. Maybe he joins a walking group. Maybe he starts restoring the motorcycle sitting untouched in his garage. Maybe he plans something, builds something, studies something. The activity itself almost doesn't matter. What matters is that tomorrow has regained a shape. There is something waiting for him. And when you talk to that man, you can feel it. He has plans. He has stories that haven't happened yet. His future still contains verbs. And that is profoundly important. Because one of the saddest ways to grow old isn't accumulating years. It's running out of reasons to look forward. The Stoics understood that a meaningful life wasn't built around constant pleasure. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake every morning asking how he could make himself comfortable. He repeatedly returned to the work in front of him, the role he had to fulfill, the kind of person he was trying to become. For the Stoics, meaning was connected to how you lived, what you contributed, and whether your actions reflected your values. That matters because passion is not the same as excitement. Excitement comes and goes. Some mornings, you won't feel inspired. Some days, the thing you love will frustrate you. Purpose survives those days. It gives direction even when motivation disappears. And perhaps that's why people with something meaningful in their lives can feel so different to be around. They're not merely trying to pass time. They're using it. Maybe you've experienced this yourself. Think back to a period when you were deeply excited about something. You woke up thinking about it. You talked about it too much. You lost track of time while doing it. You had problems? But those problems didn't occupy your entire mind. Because there was also something pulling you forward. Now compare that with a period when you felt completely directionless. Nothing to anticipate. Nothing to build. Nothing that felt particularly meaningful. Which version of you felt older? Not looked older. Felt older. That's the distinction. Because this entire video isn't really about pretending that age doesn't exist. Age exists. Bodies change. Time leaves evidence. And there is nothing shameful about that. The deeper question is whether your desire to participate in life has aged at the same speed. So ask yourself something honestly. What are you looking forward to? Not what are you supposed to be doing. Not what other people expect from you. What is something, small or large, that still makes part of you come alive? If you have an answer, protect it. Make time for it. Don't dismiss it because you're 45, 55, 65, or 75. And don't let someone who has given up on their own future convince you to give up on yours. You are not required to stop becoming just because you've accumulated birthdays. There are books you haven't read, people you haven't met, places you haven't seen, skills you haven't learned, conversations you haven't had, memories you haven't created. And as long as you're here, your story is still capable of producing new pages. Maybe that's something people sense when they meet you. You talk about tomorrow, as if you expect to be part of it. You still make plans. You still become excited. You still have something that makes you want to get out of bed. And perhaps that gives you something no cosmetic product can create. A reason to look alive. But now we come to the final reason. And this one is different. Because you can be resilient. You can adapt. Stay curious. Express what you feel. Surround yourself with the right people. And still carry something that quietly steals years from the life you're living now. Something that happened a long time ago. A betrayal. A mistake. A person you lost. Something you did and still haven't forgiven yourself for. The past can be over while remaining completely alive inside your mind. And some people spend decades returning to a moment that no longer exists anywhere except inside them. But others eventually learn how to do something extraordinarily difficult. They remember, without continuing to live there. And that brings us to the seventh and final reason. You know how to let the past go. There are people who haven't seen someone in 20 years and still argue with them every day. Not in person. In their mind. They replay what was said, what should have been said, what they wish they had done differently. They imagine the apology they never received, the explanation that never came, the conversation that will probably never happen. And every time they replay it, the body responds as if the past has returned. The person may be gone. The relationship may be over. The house may have been sold. The children may have grown up. The entire world around that memory may have changed. But inside, the moment is still happening. And that is one of the heaviest ways to move through life. Carrying yesterday into every tomorrow. Maybe it was betrayal. Someone you trusted lied to you. Maybe somebody left when you needed them most. Maybe you gave years of your life to a relationship, only to discover that the person beside you wasn't who you believed they were. Or maybe the person you can't forgive isn't somebody else. Maybe it's you. A decision you made. Money you lost. A relationship you destroyed. An opportunity you were too afraid to take. Something you said to someone before you knew it would be the last conversation. Those memories are different because there's nobody else left to blame. So you punish yourself. Quietly. You continue living. You go to work. You laugh at dinner. You answer messages. You tell everyone you're fine. But occasionally, usually when the room becomes quiet, your mind takes you back, and you hear the same sentence again. If only I had known. If only I had called. If only I had left sooner. If only I had stayed. If only I hadn't trusted them. If only I hadn't said that. If only. But here's the cruelty of regret. You are judging the person you were then, using information that only the person you are now possesses. Of course, you can see it more clearly today. You survived it. You learned from it. You know how the story ends. The person standing at the beginning of that story didn't. That doesn't mean every mistake should be excused. Some mistakes require responsibility. Some require an apology. Some require repairing whatever can still be repaired. But responsibility and lifelong self-punishment are not the same thing. At some point, you have to decide whether the past will become a teacher or a prison, because you cannot return to yesterday and create a different version of what happened. You can only decide what happens to the person who survived it. This is where Stoicism becomes painfully practical. The past belongs to the category of things you cannot change. Not difficult to change. Not unlikely to change. Impossible to change. You can learn from it. You can make amends. You can change your behavior because of it. But you cannot travel backward and negotiate with reality. And every hour spent demanding that yesterday should have been different is another hour of today handed over to something that no longer exists. Think about that. The person who hurt you may be somewhere right now, drinking coffee, laughing, sleeping peacefully, living their life. And you are still allowing a 5-year-old conversation to determine how you feel this morning. Who is carrying the punishment? Maybe not them. Maybe you are. Letting go doesn't mean saying what happened was acceptable. It doesn't mean welcoming someone back. It doesn't mean removing boundaries. It doesn't even require reconciliation. Sometimes letting go simply means, I will no longer allow this event to occupy the center of my life. You can forgive and never speak to someone again. You can accept what happened and still decide they no longer belong in your life. You can remember without reopening the wound every morning. That's the distinction. Because forgetting isn't required. Freedom is. Have you ever met someone who has every reason to be bitter, but isn't? You hear their story and almost can't understand it. They've lost people, been betrayed, started again, watched plans collapse, maybe buried someone they thought would grow old beside them, and yet they still laugh, still love, still trust carefully, still make plans, still enjoy a cup of coffee in the morning, still notice a beautiful sunset. There's something almost confusing about people like that. Until you understand what they've learned. They didn't escape pain. They stopped asking pain to follow them everywhere. And perhaps that is one of the deepest forms of youthfulness. Not having a life without scars, but refusing to become nothing more than your scars. Think about your own past for a moment. Not every memory, just the one that appeared in your mind. Before I even finished that sentence. You know which one. Maybe there's a person attached to it. Maybe a place. Maybe one terrible decision. Maybe something nobody else knows. Ask yourself, how many years have I already given this? 20? And then ask the harder question, how many more am I willing to give it? Because that's the part we forget. Holding on to the past doesn't only consume what already happened. It can consume what hasn't happened yet. The trip you haven't taken. The person you haven't met. The relationship you haven't allowed yourself to trust. The mornings you haven't enjoyed. The laughter you keep postponing. The life still waiting for your attention. You cannot change what happened, but you can refuse to make it happen again. Every single day inside your mind. Maybe this is why people look at you and underestimate your age. Maybe they don't know what you've lived through. They don't know how many times you've had to begin again. They don't know what you lost, what you survived, what you finally had to forgive. They only see what remained. Someone who still smiles, still learns, still adapts, still loves, still makes plans, still gets excited about tomorrow. They see the years you've lived, without seeing you crushed beneath the weight of them. And perhaps that's the real pattern behind all 7 of these signs. It was never about pretending you don't age. You do. We all do. Your face will change. Your body will change. Time will leave evidence that you were here. And there is nothing wrong with that. But 2 people can live the same number of years and carry those years completely differently. One carries every disappointment, every insult, every regret, every failed relationship, every version of life that didn't happen, until the weight becomes part of the way they move through the world. The other remembers, grieves, and eventually puts some things down. Not because they were insignificant, because life is still happening. So if people constantly tell you, you look much younger than your age, maybe don't rush to explain it away. Genetics matter, lifestyle matters, health matters, and no psychological trait gives anyone immunity from aging. But perhaps people are also responding to something harder to measure. The way you laugh, the way you remain interested, the way you adapt, the way you connect. The fact that after everything you've been through, there is still something in you that wants to participate in life. Maybe that's what they're seeing. Not the absence of age, the presence of life. And if that's true, protect it. Because looking young is temporary. Eventually, time wins that argument with all of us. But remaining open, curious, capable of love, capable of wonder, capable of beginning again, that's a different kind of youth. And that one is worth protecting. If you've made it all the way to the end, I want you to leave 2 numbers in the comments. Your real age, and the age people usually think you are. Nothing else if you don't want to. I want to see just how many people here have experienced the same thing. And then read a few of the other comments. You may realize you're far from alone. If someone immediately came to mind while watching this, someone whose age nobody ever seems to believe, send this video to them. And if you want more videos exploring Stoic philosophy, psychology, and the deeper patterns behind the way we live, subscribe and stay with us. But most importantly, don't spend so much time trying to look younger that you forget what actually matters. Stay interested in life. Keep learning. Keep adapting. Keep laughing. Keep making plans. And when the past has taught you everything it can, have the courage to put it down. Because you cannot stop the years from passing, but you can decide how much life you carry into those years.